Hey, I'm Matt Valley, and welcome to episode number 84 of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories of the marketing and insights pros that you trust. Now, I'm super excited to welcome Bohb Blair to the podcast today. Now, Bob and I actually met. Hey, Bob. We actually met once in person way back in 2009 when a mutual friend called him and called me and said, guys, Motörhead's playing at the Chicago House of Blues. We got to go. We both said, yes, absolutely, we got to go. And so we spent this awesome night with Lemmy and company, had a blast, copious amounts of alcohol. But it was.
Now, my memory, Matt, if I could interject here, was not only is meeting at a Motörhead concert kind of like an apocryphal origin story as it should be, Indeed. But as memory recalls, we went right from there to a dive bar on Western Avenue called the Mutiny and formed a band that never actually manifested. But we were dead serious about it that night.
I remember that. Oh my God. It was an absolutely epic night.
It was great. It was a fun one.
Let's say that. So one of the things about Bob that really struck me immediately is he has such a creative perspective on things, and that's what made the night really fun. But I also just kind of wanted to follow what he was doing. Like, where does this guy's career go from here? And he continued to work in advertising and media for a lot of years with some of the coolest titles you could imagine, like managing director of invention, global chief experience officer at some of the biggest and best agencies in the world, which brought him to today, where he really is at what I've long considered probably the most innovative and creative consumer goods company, Jones Soda.
I love Jones. Yes.
It seemed like a match made in heaven, actually. So Bob today is the Chief Marketing Officer at Jones Soda, but also the Chief Brand Officer for their expansion into cannabis with the brand Mary Jones Cannabis, which of course is an amazing name. It is the right name. So along the way, I've been following him on Facebook. I know he's had some re-energizing of his band days, something like that. So I figured we needed to talk. So welcome to the podcast, Bob.
Thank you, Matt. I love it, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into it. Let's start on the professional side. So, how did you get interested in marketing and advertising in the first place? What did your journey kind of look like? And tell us about what you're doing at Jones.
Well, the true story of how I got into marketing, I think, is actually really kind of funny and serendipitous as these things go. And the true answer is I was in no way looking to get into marketing. It was not even sort of on my mind. It was a zero. But I'll tell you what was on my mind was getting out of my current job. I was touring as the touring sound engineer and tour manager for Overkill, Nash Kato.
Oh, yes, that's right. Oh, yeah.
And it was an interesting era of the band when he was solo, and we were teetering back and forth with his solo record support and him grappling with the fact that the crowds wanted to hear Urge songs, so he would, mix and match it. I think Blackie joined us for 2 gigs, so it was one of those things. But we were doing the touring version of the band, which at the time is really funny because it featured a Sean Mulroney was touring with us at that time, and we had Nils playing guitar and this wonderful guy named Richard playing drums, who are now still dear friends of mine. And so, these touring days are all wonderful. But, and I share this with the most absolute love, Nash Kato is a nightmare to tour with. Oh my God. And try being the tour manager who's in charge of getting him from point A to point B on time. I could fill an entire podcast with, in this true story, Matt, we should start a podcast called Bob Stories from Touring with Nash. Nice. We could do a few seasons, and I only went on one tour. But anyway, as lovable as he is, I had lost it. I had just completely lost it. and I couldn't tour with them anymore. And we got back to Chicago, and I was not supposed to be done with the tour. In fact, we were just on a little break, and we were supposed to get back out on the road almost immediately. And I paid myself out of the last concert's proceeds. I put all the receipts in a bag, and I mailed them to the manager. And I said, "I'm done. I'm not leaving. Wow. I'm not getting back on the bus." Anyway, I say all that to say it was serendipitously 4th of July. And if you recall, this is all Chicago-based legend stuff, but the guys from Exit always put on this insane illegal fireworks show down like at Augusta and Rockwell or something.
Yeah.
And a bit of an annual tradition for all the rock and roll folks to go out and watch the illegal fireworks show. And so, of course, I did. And I was out there, and I bumped into my very dear friend, Jamie Duffy, who, if anyone knows him, rest in peace, very, very sorely missed gentleman from our music scene, who left us probably almost 10 years ago now. But I bumped into him, and he's like, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, bit of a weird spot. I just quit my touring gig in a huff, and I don't know what I'm going to do next." And he's like, "Oh my God, I just quit my job in a huff too." And I said, What were you doing?" And he's like, "Well, it's sort of like music and touring, only I was doing it for Camel cigarettes, and they have huge budgets, and I had almost unlimited money to route these tours and do these things through clubs across the country. And, I'm like, well, that sounds incredible." He goes, "Yeah, but there's a catch. You wouldn't believe it." And I go, "What?" "Well, when you're not touring, you got to go to an office downtown Monday to Friday." And I'm like, "Well, wait, that kind of sounds all right, like a normal job." He goes, "Yeah, you get benefits, you get 401k. I'm like, "Wait, when did you quit, Jamie? When did you quit?" And he goes, "Yesterday." And I had him write down the name of his boss. I'd never even heard of his job. I didn't know what it was. Yeah. And I called his boss the next day. It turned out I was calling a very large advertising agency. I had no idea. That person said, "Why are you calling me for a job? You're supposed to call HR and submit a resume." And I go, "Oh, my bad." So I did that. A week or two later, I ended up in front of this guy interviewing, and I ended up getting Jamie's old job. And that job was to be the technical director for the RJ Reynolds Camel Club program.
Okay.
And in hindsight, it makes total sense why they would hire people from the rock and roll touring industry and stuff, because you're setting up lights and you're setting up branding elements and whatever. But that was my foothold into what later became a whole career in marketing, because I was working at an agency. And I slowly went from being a technical director to running these programs, to pitching these programs, and then landing new accounts to do this type of work. And then, once you get to a certain status at one agency, my biggest recommendation for anybody's career, leave, because then the next place that hires you brings you in at a higher and more senior level, and you go. And I bounced a lot, and I switched jobs every couple of years for a while. But it really was all because of serendipity and bumping into my friend Jamie, and both of us hating our jobs that we were in because of something, and just really just swapping numbers. And I think I've only looked for a job 1 or 2 times in my life, and I didn't find one. The only jobs I've ever had, and I could go through every single one of them, somebody came knocking that I wasn't expecting to hear from, and I just almost always say yes if it's interesting. And it's been every step of the way.
Wow, what a fascinating story. And I remember back when I was playing in a rockabilly band in Minneapolis back in the day, they would always have the Camel cigarettes representatives there on premise.
Carrying a backpack, handing out smokes. That was my people. I think in Minneapolis, we were probably all over the 7th Street entry and First Ave and the Globe. And my favorite club, the Gay 90s.
Yes, absolutely.
I love the Gay 90s. Oh my God.
I have a familial connection to the Gay 90s. We can talk about that at some point. So.
I have legendary stories from the men's room, the club you can only access from the men's bathroom of the dance club.
Very nice. All right. Okay, cool. So tell us about how you got to Jones Soda, and kind of your big vision for what that's all about.
Yeah, sure. The last role I had before this had me running global capabilities at an agency called Publicis that has 10,000 employees and 167 offices around the world. And, it was neat at times. And I'm not going to pretend I didn't enjoy bouncing around to like some global destination or some fancy, conference or something. But in between those times, it felt unwieldy. You're talking at large groups of people. You don't talk with somebody. Your clients are a lot of them, and they're very senior, and you see them 1 or 3 times a year. And I was definitely missing the tangibility of work I'd done years ago, where I felt like I was making more of an impact, and I was talking with the people who were doing the work directly, and I just saw the results of it. Like I often would see myself at the front end of a project and never even hear about it again,
Right.
And so I think when you're starting to feel a certain way, you put your radar into the world through all sorts of cues, right? And I think I had maybe put those energies out there that it was time. And my job was very clearly a global job, and the pandemic happened. And I was doing my job 100% over Zoom to a global constituency. And it was just the most soul losing experience, having calls at weird time zones to people who are mostly having their cameras off.
Yeah.
And it had accidentally turned into the worst version of the job when the pandemic happened, because all the good parts went away, right? So I was really kind of like putting the radar out that I was maybe, looking for whatever the next thing might be. And luckily for me, one of my favorite clients that I'd worked with for years in different jobs, a guy by the name of Clive Sirkin. He was CMO of Kellogg's. He was CMO of Kimberly-Clark. And when I would work with those brands, he was my main client counterpart. And so I knew him very well, and really, luckily maintained a relationship with him. He's on the board of directors at Jones. And I didn't know or whatever that anything was looking, but he and I were just having coffees, and he would be like, oh, here's what I'm thinking about. And I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. Here's what I'm thinking about. And we would talk about Jones just because he's on the board,
Right.
And little did I know that he was soft interviewing me for their first CMO role, because they didn't have one. And the reason they were creating the role of a CMO was because this legendary 25-year soda brand had raised funding to go into cannabis, but hadn't quite figured it out past that. It was like, we're a cool soda brand. We raised $8 million to go penetrate a new category, but we've been talking about it now for 4 months and nothing's happened. And so it was very clear that the reason they did it that way was the only reason that cannabis exists for Jones is an extension of the brand, an extension of the equity, extension of everything. So you need the person that's going to do that to have some sort of feet in both parts of that world, and to own that brand relationship to take it into another category. And so CMO of this soda brand with the remit to successfully take it into cannabis. And I had a fainting spell, Matt. I was like, wait a second. I can go from a global job that feels unwieldy to working on this very specific, legendary craft soda brand with a very small but dedicated, passionate team. And I get to go make something where the making of it is so real and so tangible, and you get to hold it in your hand and you get to drink it at the end. It couldn't have checked more boxes for me. I also love weed, Matt. I love weed. I've been a big time weed user for all the way back since college. And so for me, it just brought together a lot of things I'm passionate about and a lot of things that are fun. And it gave me that sense of getting my hands on the work that I was so missing. And right as the pandemic came to a close, I don't mind traveling globally, but I didn't love those long flights. And now here I am working domestically. I work for a company where I go back and forth to Seattle. I go back and forth to California. And so just my life is better. I have a 4-year-old alongside my teenagers, and I get to be home all the time now. And anyway, it's really brought together what I'm looking for in career and lifestyle into one place. and
awesome.
the people are amazing, and it's just great. It's great.
Cool. I have one question about that, because if I think about Jones, it's iconoclastic, right? And it's got it. You join the company where it already has a point of view. So how do you balance that coming in as a CMO, especially with a brand extension? How much of it is sort of leveraging what?
Oh my God, that's exactly the right question, man. I'm gonna get a prop here, just to show you some stuff. Let me see what I got here. So I would be insane to come into Jones and change anything that was part of the brand, right? So when you have Jones, people will be like, the best part is, for a small soda brand, 1 in 10 households have bought Jones in the last year in the US and Canada, and 60% of people know who we are without any help. That's incredible. That's numbers that beat Airbnb. That's numbers that beat my previous clients. You know, it's insane. So this brand is so well known. And when people say what they know about it, they go, Jones, okay, brand that puts photos on the label, literally in the 1 or 2 first things they say about the brand. And then they go into our flavors, and they'll have like a favorite flavor, or they'll remember a crazy flavor or something, right?
Right.
So when I came in, there was no way I was going to mess with that recipe, right? So the first thing I did is I looked, and I wanted to go a little bit more following the sword over it. You know, if anything, the brand had gotten a little soft in their rule book, and wasn't falling on the sword over the notion of photos, flavors, black and white with color, you know? So we kind of retrenched a little bit and just said, no, who are we? And we are very strict about that. Then what I did is I thought, well, I can look at the marketing ecosystem and make sure that it's functioning as good as it can, because I don't want to change anything. So right now this bottle is part of our old line, where we switched to augmented reality labels right before I started. And that's really cool. So some labels come to life and play video, but it was doing it through an app, which is now old fashioned and passe. So when I came in, we rebooted it, and we're about to launch our mobile AR version of that same experience. So it's seamless, frictionless, requires no download, and has given an administrative tool to my team so that they can upload videos and match them to labels on their own, which then makes the management cost of the ecosystem of augmented reality labels cheaper to run. So as a CMO, I thought my job isn't to change labels or augmented reality, it's to make that system easier to use for the team and cheaper.
Right.
So that's an example. We put a quote under every lid, and everyone knows that. I just was on the phone last night with a woman in Canada who called the consumer hotline and left us a voicemail, and I called her back, and I heard the most heartwarming, gorgeous story about a family tradition around caps under the lid. And it just reminds you, this is a brand that matters to people. This is a brand people care about. So then you come in and you go, oh, I'm launching a cannabis brand, right? What is the right way to leverage those equities and those attributes, but not mess anything up, right? We are the first mainstream CPG brand to go into cannabis that is not an alcohol brand, which means we're the first CPG brand that has an all ages audience on one side of the fence and an adult audience on the other. So as we launched this, coming up with the name of the brand and all that was part of what had to happen. There was nothing, right? So Mary Jones is one of those names that once you come up with it, you're like, well, obviously I'm going to do it. You know, how can you not? But it was very choiceful to say, what are the minimum things we change about this brand, so that a consumer definitely knows which one they're getting, but they definitely know which brand it's coming from.
Right.
So we still do the photos on the label. We turned the N around on the Jones, and we tagged it with Mary.
Yeah.
We got the same fun tops, but they're different. This one's twist off. This one's child resistant.
Cool.
And this is only sold in legally licensed dispensaries. This is sold in every Kroger in the US, you know? And then as we thought about going, and this is a 10 milligram single dose. Then as we take the brand into a higher multi-dose format, we go into a tall boy, we go 100 milligrams.
Yeah.
Then we take the brand into a syrup, and you can do a mixing and cocktail mocktail relationship. But this is a locked flavor system. This is the exact same flavor profile as mainline Jones. The flavor scientist of Jones, Sarah, is the one who formulates all the Mary Jones products. And so, and I got one more for you. Mainline Jones sells these, very popular in Canada, carbonated candies.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And we're about to launch our infused version of these in California in a couple months. And again, same flavor profile.
Yeah.
So we have a flavor-driven portfolio that cuts across cannabis, recreational, edible formats, and we're just kind of broadening our stance, and we're going anywhere the flavor takes us. So it's been really interesting. Kind of, it's a different mindset. It's still creative, it's still marketing, but it's not that marketing of what's our TV ad. It's that marketing of what's our flavor strategy, what's our format strategy. And it's just it's completely energizing, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what an exciting thing to be just not just on the cusp of something, but actually creating it, right? Shaping it.
Well, you're creating a brand, but also while recreational cannabis feels like it's been around for a while, it hasn't. It's really new in most markets.
Yeah.
And then most of that business is still buying leaf product and pre-rolls and things like that. Cannabis beverage is only 3% of the category today.
Oh, interesting.
So we're really in a high momentum, high growth, growing 30% year over year. The whole thing's the Wild West environment where you got to build it to run it, So it's really fun, really fun.
Yeah. And I know that the data, for example, that you have at your disposal to measure your progress is very different.
Very different. But I was on the phone with somebody that is in the industry, but also worked in mainline in data, and they were reminding me that while the data seems newer and less accessible and blah 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 blah, the reality is it's more higher resolution than most of the data you would get in classic CPG marketing. And I'm like, wait, why? What? And he goes, because almost no transaction in cannabis doesn't happen through a dedicated point of sale system that's tied into one of the major things. And you're like, wait, you're right. They all use tablets. Even if you're at the store, you're tableting it. And they can't use the classic credit card systems where you lose some of the resolution of data. You're doing it either debit card or Venmo and the reality is, and I'm going to give a shout out to a company because they gave me access to their data for a little while to demo the platform. But there's this company called Headset that has done a very good job of amassing the retail data. And right now I have access to that dashboard. And it's been really interesting for me comparing. All right, so we used to win awards for the retail data that we built for Kraft Heinz over at my last job. Okay. And the reason everybody was so impressed with us for winning awards was that we could figure out within like 3 weeks a pretty accurate view of what was happening at the retail level, despite the fact that retailers don't report it. And everyone would be like, oh, you can only tie into coupons, but people who use coupons aren't the people we want to follow. Whatever. It was always a mess. And it was like, oh my God, these people are amazing because they figured out how to get a view of that for a major CPG brand who spends zillions of dollars, right?
Right.
I can go in right now and I can get within a 90-something% accuracy, a direct view of everything that was bought, me and my competitive set in any state in the US as of yesterday.
That's amazing. Wow.
And there's very few transactions that would miss that lens because there's nobody paying in cash and there's nobody paying in, like most orders are done on a kiosk before you walk up to the counter. Right. Yeah. Tied to a loyalty number in most cases. It's the most attributed data set I've ever been around. Yeah. And so anyway, it's very interesting. The where something that starts late enters the market sophisticated. You're not catching up to some antiquated system. They started this way, and anyway, I find it very, very interesting. We're spending so little money in paid marketing now because, we're a new business and there's not that many opportunities out there that those insights and that data is being used to drive business decisions and portfolio strategy. And, what's our next flavor going to be? If we have these 6 flavors to pick from the Jones archive, which one's the one that will make the most difference? And so we're using the data in those ways.
Cool. Yeah, that's fascinating. I guess, they take with a new industry like that, they take advantage of all of the progress that's been made.
Yeah, you're just starting right at whatever the most modern thing is. Why wouldn't you?
Start on third base, as they say.
Yeah.
So with that, one of the reasons why I was really excited to have you on the podcast is it's really fun and insightful to have people who are what I would call like research adjacent, working in marketing and working in advertising, comment on, what's important in insights and what the future looks like. And so given, your unusual path, I guess, through this whole space, I'd love to know sort of from your perspective, what you see as important or the future of research.
I think what's important and what the future of research are two polar opposite things, and that's because people aren't trustworthy. But I'll answer both questions. What's important about research is to use objective information to make the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
The future of research is to cover your ass with research so you're not accused of making the wrong decision, or to validate the decision you wanted to make. And the more I've been in situations where the data is readily available and readily funded, and there's people who are smart that can go get that answer for you, I have zero problem validating almost any hypothesis through very objective seeming data. And that's because data sets are biased, questions are biased, queries are biased, everything is biased. And if you want a chart that goes this way and shows that you're going to make money doing that, yeah, sure. It's just about how you craft it, right? And people who are really good at it are really good at it. And so I think the future of data is validating things. And the future of data is getting paid to validate things by the people who want to spend the money. And that is typically biased. And I think biased data to support findings that need to get funding is 100% where the entire thing's going. So the opposite of that is what's important. And it's what I've been trying to figure out is how to get the honest view, right? Like how do I really, really know? And, cannabis has been interesting because it's a microcosm of other industries. It just feels smaller and like you can get your head around it, And almost every partner I've met with, and I love them all, and the ones that are even doing great business with me today, all of them sold me a bill of goods at the front end of our relationship. Every single one of them, right? Because we're all high on the supply of the promise of cannabis, and there's gold in them there hills, And so almost like holding hands with somebody and jumping into a business relationship with them almost requires you both being like, we're going to make millions. Just the same way every band I've ever been in started with, we're going to be huge, And if you don't believe that, then don't start the band, right? And if you don't believe it, don't go into cannabis beverage. But the front end of the relationships have been pumping up the opportunity. And what I've really found very important as I land the plane is to ground the opportunity. And we're a publicly traded company. I have to report numbers to a board of directors. I have to report numbers to the street and earnings call. I can't sell too much of that pipe dream. Quite literally in this case, that's not even a metaphor. But anyway, that it's been really interesting for me as someone who now loves the idea and the promise and the brand and marketing of cannabis that also owns the P&L to say, I got to make it a successful ROI driving business. And so how do I not base all of my thinking on whimsy and dreams and really ground it? And so it's been, I don't know, it's a long-winded answer to your question, but
no, I think it's really important. I think a lot of insights professionals have heard kind of that cynicism, and it's a wake up call, right? It's a constant challenge for us to actually produce truth rather than whatever that biased view is.
I'll tell you, if I was a research company right now and I had a client, I would give them 2 answers to every question and I would label them. Here's the question. Here's the answer to your question that makes you look great, and here's the one you need to hear.
Yeah. Yep.
And you use these how you wish. And then they would go, "Oh, man, you're really good at this, and data's really biased, isn't it?" And you go, "Yeah, it really is. Isn't it a joke?"
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so I know that this whole started for you with music, right?
Sure.
Obviously, there's a passion for it that brought you on tour. Wanted to be around it. but you didn't completely let go of that. So I'm curious to know how that's kind of continued to manifest in your life.
Well, plug. I have my band Bicycle Tricycle, and it's a labor of love. The older I get, the more it turns into a recording passion project and a playing out passion project. Although recently I found a group of like-minded dads, and we get together almost every Tuesday night in a rehearsal space up north and just rock out. If you wrote a song, the other guys will learn it. If you wanted to like play a Pixie song as loud as possible and sing it at your freaking full blast, everyone's good enough to learn it real quick and play it. And it's just, we've been having a really good time. So music, whether it's just for fun or recording and being incredibly pretentious and ridiculous with my output as Bicycle Tricycle, I take all that really seriously, but thankfully I don't depend on it for my livelihood, because that part never happened for me. And I think now that I have some more perspective, and I've watched some of my friends who are incredibly talented have different levels of careers in music. I think if anyone was planning on sticking with music, one of the critical parts is sticking with music. You can't be in halfway.
Yeah.
And if you ever feel like in your heart, like, I'm going to give it a little try, but if it doesn't work out, I'm going to go into marketing, then you're going into marketing. You have to like 100 billion% be in. And then of that group of people, some people end up having great careers out of it. I think having a career that gave me permission to treat my music as the artistic hobby that it is has allowed me to really let it be something really personal. I care deeply about the records I put out. I play way too many instruments on them, and then I convince my more talented friends than me to come over and play on them. And I'm graced by performances on my record that nobody would be able to afford to have if they weren't just doing me favors. Like these are really, my records have, Solomon Snyder and Matt Walker from the Cupcakes on them, and Max Crawford from Poi Dog Pondering, and my friends Jason and Nils, and are the cream of the crop of the Chicago scene, and John San Juan, and they come by this little shitty room in my house and they plug in and they play on my records, and it really it means a lot to me, because I get to put something out I'm really proud of, and I it doesn't matter how many people listen to it, super proud of it, and so that's been really fun. So that's what music is for me today, is a passion project, but a super passion project.
I identify with every word you said there. That's awesome. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. All right. So with a career that has intersected media quite a bit over the last several years, curious to know for you personally, what media you turn to either for inspiration or insight or enjoyment. What do you play?
I've become, well, first of all, I'm a stereotype, I guess, because I become one of these podcast people where I mostly listen to podcasts compared to probably any other entertainment format. When I got
those people.
What?
I love those people.
I know it's kind of an awesome format. And, when I got my Spotify year in review, it's like almost no music in it. And I'm like, oh my God. I will tell you how bad it got for me. A new album comes out that I heard is good, right? A musical album. I will listen to the dissect podcast that goes through the album and talks about all the new ones. I listened to the deep dive on the weekends, whatever that, radio station album was. I listened to the deep dive on it, which was like 3 hours before I went and then listened to the record, because then I could enjoy the record more, because I knew all the factoids that sat behind it. So anyway, I'm a total sucker for that. And my favorite one, and I just sit on the edge of my seat waiting for the next episode to come out, is The History of Music in 500 Songs. Have you encountered that podcast yet?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
It's shocking, because there was a book written called The History of Music in 500 Songs, and this podcast takes each page of that book and makes it into a 2+ hour podcast that does a very deep history. And there's going to be 500 episodes of the podcast when it's done. And he's up to episode 167 now or something. It's incredible. It's incredibly researched, incredibly nuanced. And so for me, every time I plug in a podcast, it's this weird mix of entertainment and education. And so either I'm learning about a period of time I wished I knew more about, like a music documentary, or I'll listen to like I do the Huberman Lab podcast where it's a neuroscientist from Stanford. I feel like maybe I'm deluding myself, but when I picked the right podcast, I feel like I didn't waste time entertaining myself. Like I had some weird, it sounds dumb to say, but some personal improvement came out of it, or some better understanding. Or I really got into that Cocaine and Rhinestones podcast by the Disgraceland guy. Because I know all the rock stories, but I don't think I knew all the country music stories, and so
they're really similar.
Bring it on. I love, so anyway, that's my chosen, if I'm listening, that's what I'm listening to.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, this is a question I really want to know, because I know we share a mutual appreciation for Motörhead. And
who doesn't?
Who doesn't? I mean, it's almost, it cuts across everything, right? But this is what I really want to know. So deep down in your heart, right? So you're stranded on a desert island. Maybe you have some Mary Jones soda, perhaps unlimited supply, right? But you also have 3 records of your choosing to keep you company for the rest of your days. What are they, Bob?
I think I'm not going to pretend I didn't see this question coming and think about it, but I think the issue with choosing a finite group of something is the minute you choose them, you're going to be plagued by what you did not choose, right? Like
plagued with that for years. I remember conversations I had with people 10 years ago where I gave them an answer, and now I'm like, I got to call them and tell them.
I think the real trick to it is to somehow play some judo on that and say, how do I get something that feels finite without feeling like there's an edge to it that I missed out on or something? And so I feel like personally that wouldn't be very hard for me, although I might have to burst the edge and get a 4th album in there. But it would be to take the 4-album arc from Brian Eno of his rock albums, from the Here Come the Warm Jets, Taking Tiger Mountain by Strategy, Before and After Science, Another Green World. And because what right before that was Roxy Music, and what was right after that was his ambient career, you don't feel like there's any edges, and you can just say, and if there's somebody who I'd be willing to mind meld with over time, I think Brian Eno. Okay, let's go, brother. I feel like there's enough depth and atmosphere that I could, every time I listen to it, find something new to latch on to, and I don't feel like I would be focused on what I was missing out on.
Got it. So is that your 3 right there? Or is that
it's 4, and I would have to figure out, and I think if I was forced to, I would kick out Before and After Science, but I would be very upset about it.
All right. Fair enough. Excellent answer. It's surprisingly the first Brian Eno response. That's question every
he's podcast. My favorite.
I'm actually shocked. So you got 3 in 1, though. It's like 3 Brian Eno mentions. So there you go. You're doing your part. All right, Bob. This has been just an awesome chat. Super glad we reconnected. And hey, if I still lived in Chicago, right, we would have that legendary band that we had.
We'd be huge.
We would be huge. We wouldn't be working in research.
I wouldn't even be doing this right now.
All right, Bob. Thanks so much. Great fun. Keep in touch and rock and roll.
Yeah. Rock and roll.